and to the special guests that we have here. So welcome to our new space, and a new year, and a new PTA, and a new president. And so the joke that I tell is, if anybody has seen the movie Bad Moms, we are not that PTA. So, but you know, we're on the nice side. So it was kind of interesting the first time I took this job, not the PTA stuff. But thank you for coming, and we have a couple special guests tonight. Our new superintendent and our new assistant superintendent. So it's a new year, new school, kind of like a new regime. But without further ado, I want to introduce Maryann, who has been our assistant superintendent for 7 years, right? And I think, you know, in our marketing, she has a wealth of experience that we have had the benefit of receiving it in her role as assistant superintendent for the past 7 years. And we're very excited to sort of hear about what she has for a vision of the future in her new role. So thank you.
There we go. So as I spoke initially, I think with Maryann and Andrea Rue, and then with Val about the possibility of doing tonight in September and joining with the PTA, it kind of said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And then the flurry of activities and things this summer in transitioning into a new role, even though I've been here in Clinton, has definitely consumed me. We've had great things happen. So suddenly, I think I saw Andrea a week ago and was like, hey, that's next week. And it's been on the calendar, it's been the target. And you know, I had some early reflection when I was first asked to do this about what this might be and what it was going to look like. And we said, we'll talk more. So I have been thinking about it, and then in the last week or so, really trying to decide how do we want tonight to go. And I realized it really fits well into what I've shared with the Board of Ed since I was appointed superintendent, that opportunity as part of my entry plan to get out and to be able to talk, share some thinking, some vision, who I am as a leader, but then have an opportunity to talk with invested parents and community members. And that's been a big part of what my last couple months have been. And so trying to decide how do I do tonight, I decided to start with a little bit about who I am. I've worked with many of you, I've interacted with many of you. You've seen me at meetings, maybe you heard me talk and present, you've definitely seen my face, and with some of you we've worked together on committees or other things. But what I found as I started to think about stepping into this role or wanting to step into this role, I did a lot of reflection about who I am as a leader and as a person, to prepare for that and to really decide, is this the right step for me, and can I lead this district and this community in the way that I think it deserves, and am I the right match? And so I want to take a few minutes tonight to share that. For those of you who know me or don't know me, there may be some insights, but I had to do a lot of thinking and reflection about those pieces of my leadership. And I think it's important to start there tonight, and hopefully not just tonight, but over the next many years as I lead Clinton, you're going to see that really shine through in the kind of work that we do together to move this community forward in this educational community. So I guess this slide, at heart, more than anything, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher. That's the core of who I am. It's what motivates me. It's where my passion is. And yet I keep taking these administrative or leadership roles, and in some ways separate a little bit from what the core of what makes me alive. And it really is that desire to teach. So that's the baseline. Everything I do, whether I'm doing a presentation, I'm doing professional development with teachers, I'm working with administrators, there's that fiber of wanting to work together with people to lead, to think, because that's what teaching is to me. Not standing and delivering, which I'm doing right now, but hopefully we're going to shift to what I think a classroom needed to be, hopefully how I led my classroom and how I've done my work with educators in Clinton over the last several years. Because teaching is about collaboration, it's about sharing ideas, it's about forging forward with paths and learning new things. And so that really is a big part of who I am. The second one, engagement. You know, the word in education is collaboration. And that only scratches the surface, because as a teacher, as an administrator, as a leader, and now as a superintendent, for me, part of my core value is that we all have to engage. It isn't about me in this role as a superintendent. It isn't about me just setting the vision and saying we're moving forward. That's a portion of leadership, but really the key to leadership is engaging the people that you're working with. And whether that's students in the classroom, it's administrators, it's my board of ed, or it's all of you and the community beyond, the town boards, the people who are just vested and engaged in Clinton, that's what my work is, and it's helping to lead that forward and bring it together. That's hard work. It's not easy, it's time consuming, but it's a big part of how I operate, and I'm hopeful that I can continue to do that in this role. The third piece is why I'm here in Clinton, because this community is special. And if you're going to be a good teacher, if you're going to be a good leader, you've got to care deeply about what you're doing, but not just the work, the people that you're engaging with. And that is key to a core value for me, and it's what I expect of the people I work with. That every student who comes across the threshold, every parent that comes in with a concern, that's what we are in Clinton, and that's what we need to be in Clinton. We need to care deeply, and we need to connect at the student level, at the teacher level, at the administrative level, in the community, and with all of you. So those three things, I think, really do represent who I am and why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So the second piece is probably a little more formal, but the idea of trying to present myself as I began to interview with several different stakeholder groups and then with the board in the process of going through and being selected to be the next superintendent. I really wanted to refine who I am as a leader. And again, I've been here, people know me, but I'm not sure everybody saw the leadership threads of how I approach my work. The teachers did, because that's been a big focus of my role as the assistant superintendent on the teaching and learning side. And I think some others I worked with may have seen glimpses of that. But to be a good leader, you have to really understand what principles represent your leadership style, and then is that the right fit for a community or for the work that I think needs to happen. And it wasn't an easy decision to change the work that I was doing, because I love it deeply, but it was the right decision for me, and I hope in the long run for Clinton. So these 5 things, and I'm not a big educational jargon person. I think we create these smoke screens sometimes with these terms and pieces in education, and it's so much simpler than that. So you'll see this chart represents, again, leadership principles, but in a way that really, and one of them is systems and simplicity, but is rather simplistic, but I hope elucidates who I am. So the first one on the list, and that's purposeful, is I am about people. Education, communities, public education, really successfully doing what Val talked about in Beyond Measure, of helping our children become who they're going to be. And that path for that is all about people. It doesn't work if we're not all connected, if we don't get the best people in the classroom working with our children, that we don't bring people together in these kinds of forums and throughout the community to believe in what we're doing and get behind it. And so at that baseline level, this is what's most important to me. And it takes time, again, and I think what I'm most worried about as I step into this role is how the managerial, operational pieces on all the different levels start to pull you away from that core principle of leadership. So when that happens, you got to remind me that I said this here tonight at the beginning of my tenure, that we are about people, and Clinton's about people. This community is so, I'm getting chills talking about it, but it is. And you're sitting here in a building that is a tribute to that. So that is a core piece of who I am, and it's why I'm here, and it's why I said I want to do this crazy job. The second one is knowledge, because I have a background as a science teacher. So I was a biology major, pre-med major, and boy, they shoved a lot of detail and knowledge into my head. But what I learned from that, I think, is that while that's important, the ability to apply that knowledge, the ability to think flexibly has to be part of that. And so for me, it's a balance. But oftentimes we go forward with emotion, we go forward with reaction, we go forward with what our gut is. And I would say, for the majority of people, that's usually right. You need to follow that gut and that instinct if there's something bothering you. But to do that without some database, without some knowledge, without making sure that we're grounded in the right direction, I think is a mistake. And so that second piece of really understanding current existence, understanding some of the background, and really getting some detailed information and taking the time to invest in some analysis and some thinking around that only makes our path forward much stronger. And so I think you'll see that. I hope over the next few years that that's a piece that becomes part of the grounding of the things I present, the decisions we make going forward, that they're not made lightly, that they are based not on mounds of data, but that balance between what we know is right and what we believe in, based with foundation of some knowledge and information that really supports our decision making. The third one, maybe it's sandwiched in the middle for a reason. It wasn't purposeful, but as I look at it now, it makes me smile. The idea of systems and simplicity. I can't step into something new and make a whole bunch of technical changes without taking a look at the big picture for sustainability and practicality. And so I often will pull back and say, let's look at this, and you're right, we need to make that change, but let's make that change so that it becomes systemic, that it becomes sustainable. And then the other thing that happens in education that I can't stand, and I will do my best, is we like to make these big, magnificent, steps and procedures and manuals, and we're gonna follow all of this. There's a simplicity to the work we're doing. It's caring about kids. It's finding those core instructional practices and strategies and tools that make the difference, and then letting kids and teachers engage in that. And that's the work in the classroom. It's much simpler than we like to make it. And then even with the work that we do outside of there, we need to not add layers and layers to the work we do. We need to keep it simple, but it has to be systematic. And when we decide something's important, we need to make it sustainable, and it has to filter through. And I think, Val alluded to a lot of the work that's happened in the last 5 years. I believe deeply that we've tried to develop those systems and those approaches, and we're well on our way to doing that. That work is continuous, but I know that we're there, and I plan to continue it. The bullet that goes with that, I think, is important to note as well, though, and that's to evaluate current systems for efficiency and improvement. We are at a point in Clinton that there's lots of great things happening. I'm concerned, and we'll talk probably a little more about it tonight, I'm really concerned in making sure those great things continue. And as we all know, there's lots happening around us, budgets are tight, there's things happening at the state, and if we don't do our due diligence to really look at what we're doing that matters, what we're doing maybe that doesn't matter, and how we're allocating our funding to the things that are important to us and are important to our kids' development, then shame on me. And so, quite frankly, as a superintendent, I have to shift my thinking. I have to turn over some of that instructional leadership to really good people around me and spend some time really looking at our systems efficiencies, how we're managing things on the operations side in order to make sure we can sustain the good stuff that we have. At ribbon cutting, for those of you who might have been there, it was so hot, right? And my goal was to keep the speech really short, but be true and meaningful to what my take is about the New Morgan and about our next venture. And the theme of it was about stewardship. And I think that gets back to this, that it is incredibly important to me that as the superintendent, I set the tone and the standard for stewardship of the things that we've been given and that are supporting education in Clinton. And this is one of them. So that idea of stewardship, that idea of really evaluating our systems and being sure that when we make decisions and we put money towards things, that those are smart and wise and they're helping to advance the learning for our kids in the community. Clear communication. I've probably, in my time this summer, heard this more, had more conversation with our administrators, with our Board of Ed about how we do this. For the last 5 years, we've been talking about how we do this better. And I don't have all the answers, but we're basically embarking on a year-long mission to figure that out. because it's varied. Different constituencies, different stakeholders want different types of communication. And so this is a challenging one, but it is probably the most important thing that we're going to do, is that we're going to help people understand who we are and what we're about. We're going to communicate that in a variety of different ways that reach those different stakeholders, but we're going to do it smart. And I don't know all of the ways that's going to look, but please know that our Board of Ed is committed to that, and that is one of our goals, to really refine and not chase it, but decide these are the most effective ways and do those really, really, really well, so that people know our message and they know what we're about. When it comes to people, this is the other one. I don't hide behind email. I'm much more likely to go out and talk to someone face to face. I'm much more likely to pick up that phone, because again, it goes back to people and relationships and communication, clear communication, making sure people understand perspective, nuance, and decisions that are made is really important. It's all about context, and if you can get people on board to understand how much thought went into the decision making and communicate that clearly, we're going to be much more successful. The last one is maybe the crazy component of what you need to become a district leader and a superintendent. Not just time, not just effort, but truly a passion and an unwavering commitment to what's right. And with that goes the ability to listen, so that you can filter that commitment in the right ways. I told the board, and I'm all in Clinton, and it was important to me that they knew that. And I truly hope that you're going to see that play itself out over the next 10 years. We'll see. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about this, and again, I don't like the fact that I'm just standing here talking, so I promise I'm almost done. But I do think this is my opportunity to help get some message out about truly who I am as a leader and how I will approach the work. So I want to tell you the story a little bit about, as I step into this role and as I've talked to people, there's always the newness, the idea, we have a lot of new things happening, the idea of this is an opportunity, we have to take advantage of it, and it's an urgency. Not just me, but anytime there's that transition, and we have several of them here in Clinton. I have shared with the board and my administrative team that although I've been here, so I share with you now, although I've been here in Clinton, there's still a huge transition in roles, responsibilities, and perspectives that have to happen. So generally when a superintendent comes into a new position, they create their entry plan and they go through listening tours and community outreach, and they have some space to learn systems and people before there's new planning. And while I feel an urgency to jump right in on certain things, and I think the board does and probably you guys do, there's also a reservation to hold back a little bit, to give ourselves that time, to give myself that time as I approach this, to really do the things that are up there. That I can't make the assumption that I have the pulse, that I know, just because I've had lots of conversations with several of you, or my teachers, or my administrators. I think it's important that I take the time to do that expansion of relationships, to get out and to listen to groups that maybe I've talked to here and there, but in a more formal way, to elicit some feedback and to do the listening tour that often occurs. And then the last bullet, which I'm doing tonight, and did a little bit to help people understand who I am. I think that's a foundational piece of establishing the kind of work that we're going to do collectively and collaboratively as we move forward. So let's talk about critical transitions. I'm going to take a moment to introduce our new assistant superintendent. Marco Famigletti is here.
Hi, good evening. First of all, thank you for having me as your assistant superintendent. What I bring to the table is an outsider's perspective, and I'm relatively a newcomer here, and what I can echo is everything that Maryann has said about the sense of community here in Clinton. It is truly second to none, and I've been in many places. I've seen many different school districts, and the welcome that I received when I first arrived, meeting all of the teachers, and most importantly, your kids, has been phenomenal. And I was very happy to see that Beyond Measure screening will happen here next month. It's a movie that you should all see, our teachers should all see, because it really does reflect some of the things that are already happening here in Clinton, and especially here at Maryann School. So I'm going to leave you with that little bit of a teaser. But what I can tell you is that I'm thrilled to be here. You're going to get all of my efforts and many, many years to come. I want to thank you for having me.
So just a little bit of background. Marco went through a fairly rigorous process this summer, and Kathy Tessman was a PTA representative on our committee. So we had a committee process. This was one of the first critical transitions for me, was to be able to get the right person on board to partner and to be able to continue the work that I had been leading, and also to support me as I transition into this role. Marco has a background, he's a science teacher too, sorry. But he has been a middle school science teacher and a middle school assistant principal and principal of Avon Middle School, was middle school of the year several years ago, but had been principal there for 10 years. Yes. And so comes to us with some really great building-based experience, but also had done some leadership work around teacher evaluation, had been part of their curriculum council, and so he brings a really good insight, I feel, to the teaching and learning process that's much more along the lines of where we're headed in Clinton, and that's not always what you see come through in some of those interviews. One of the things that he has continued to push me on, and thinking a while back with Andrea, a book read that we did early on, might have been the first one, was one of the things as he looked at our foundation skills and our mission and our vision that he talked about was, I don't see innovation as much, and I don't see leadership as much. And I think we've been doing those things, but it's not necessarily codified. He kind of had me at those two, because it was a deeper thinking rather than going back to just analysis of test results, or I don't see. It really is about what we want for our kids, and that came through really clearly. The other thing that came through really clearly with Marco was that ability to connect and build relationships. And that is a part of who we are, and I think he's joined us. He's helped me tremendously already, and is really a critical part of our administrative team in very short time. So, but that was a major transition for me, and I hope and I think and I believe and I know that we've got the right person on board. So, obviously, the other major transition, in addition to a new job and all of these things, is the new Maryann School. And you know, I didn't want tonight to be the focus, you know, just Maryann, because our K-12 experience is really pretty unique and fabulous and ever improving. But you can't not appreciate the culmination of the effort, the work, the sweat, tears, commitment of the programmatic side, as well as the community side and the support that's resulted in this really amazing learning institution. I hate the word institution, that's a bad choice. But this learning environment, if you have not had a chance to be here during the day, it's transformed the way kids carry themselves, the way they behave, the way that they're engaging with each other. There's just an entirely different atmosphere that's collaborative. I see kids sitting together, working during their study halls instead of just sitting around a table. The Chromebooks are out, they're talking, they're sharing, and they're productive and engaged. And it's just a great feel. I think we've elevated expectations for kids. We've given them tools to let them do the kind of learning we want them to do, and it's just transformative. So this was a big experience and was a lot of work this summer. But not just the new Maryann opening, you know, for the ribbon cutting, which was the very public, but the new Maryann opening for staff to come into this building, unpack, be ready, and really have that energy and enthusiasm to welcome our kids. And that was a huge effort on the part of us as well as the building administration. Obviously the ribbon cutting, if you did attend, was hot, but an amazing event. Just, again, energy. You can't walk into this building without that energy and excitement about what this community values and where we're headed. And then lastly, after the ribbon cutting for students, and then finally the most important thing is that I truly believe that this transition into this new Maryann really has transformed the learning environment for kids. So I had getting the right person on board. We had opening the school in a really positive way. And then the other one that's really critical for a new superintendent is with staff. And so our beginning with staff is called convocation, and we bring everybody into an auditorium. Always was the town hall. But this year we were able to do our convocation here in the auditorium at the new Maryann, and our entire staff in that auditorium. And this is probably a story you're like, why is she telling this? It was such an amazing moment for me personally. So I'm telling you a little story, a little insight into the things that that influence why I do this work. It was nerve-wracking from February when I started thinking about this, from May when I was appointed. I knew this was kind of that make or break moment. Tonight might be the second make or break moment for me. But that day was building and building, and yet the opening of the school and the logistics of furniture and unpacking was consuming me, and I didn't feel like I had the head time to get it really ready, and I wanted it to be great. And in the end, it was great. And I share that because we were in the auditorium, the entire district staff, all of the teachers, Marie's here, all of the teachers in there. And if you've been in the auditorium or were here or walked in on the ribbon cutting, that giant, humongous screen, right, came down, filled the whole stage, floor to top, huge, and the projector showing this PowerPoint. And here I am standing next to it. Ray Smith gets me mic'd up with my little wireless mic. I felt like Steve Jobs. It was unbelievable. I probably looked like him too, a little weird, a little over. It was incredible. So that moment was incredible, to look out on our staff and to realize what this community has given us and what opportunity I have. So that was the moment of real excitement, energy, and yeah. So the message, though, was probably the more important part. And just briefly, I think what I wanted our staff to understand is that, and you guys know, that we've experienced several years in education reform and failure and new assessment and new standards, and we're not good enough. And there is a swirl of new initiatives, teacher evaluation, and we need to hold those teachers accountable. And yet, what I saw our teachers do this entire time was to thoughtfully embrace the change. To step back and say, all right, Common Core standards, while everybody else is slipping out, let's look at what they really say. Let's decide, do we agree, do we not? These are the core pieces. You're right, it's not that different. It's raising the bar for kids. It's going to be a challenge, but we think it's okay. They did that in English. They did it in math. They did it in all of the other areas, new science standards. And I watched our teachers not just say, oh, here we go again, but engage and talk and develop and make it interesting and better for kids as a result. And I am incredibly proud of that, and you all need to know that. Are we perfect? No. Do we still have lots of work to do? Yes. But they did that, and they did it in a way that is different than what I saw my colleagues in other towns doing. And that, to me, again, is why I want to lead this district. So what I tried to do, because, again, you want people to start on a high note, and I think we ended last year tired. Many of us end our days tired. But we ended last year kind of tired. And so I took them on that journey and shared with them what I'm sharing with you now, what I've seen in our staff. And kind of walked back through the reminders of the challenges. And then the second portion of it, and some of you may, there's a guy by the name of Simon Sinek who has a TED Talk, and I thank you, Peggy, because we spent one night talking about TED Talks. And it talks about great leadership and how they inspire. And the core part of that is about your why. That people don't respond to the what, and they don't respond to the how, but they do respond, and they'll get on board if your why matters. And so we kind of used that and talked with staff about that. But I continue to revisit that, because I think if as a leader, if as a district, as a community, we really can focus and communicate, there goes communication again, what our why is, then we're going to be pretty powerful and unstoppable, and people are starting to notice. And I want everybody to notice. What's our why? I don't have that exact answer, because you know why? It's not my why. It's our why. So what I'm saying to you tonight is we need to embark on that. My board needs to, our board, we do as parents, teachers, and I shared my core values, some of my whys, but that's the work we need to do. And then we need to communicate it clearly. But I'll ask you what your why is as well. It's great. It's a great reference. I see teachers and I'm like, oh, I was thinking about that the other day and I was getting up and so it's resonating and we're having those conversations, but that's what we need. We need our focus, our goals. Who are we? And we need to define that collectively, not just me as the leader, not just you as a group of parents, but collectively as a community. And I think we just haven't quite articulated it in a way that brings it all together. Okay? That's my thought, but more to come. So this kind of gets to just what I was saying, is that one of the things that we've gone back with educators and leaders is just started to try to ask these questions and get at what is our why. So how do we focus what our core message is? What makes us special in Clinton? What do we want for our children? The second one's really important. How do we sustain ourselves? And that's a message I keep bringing back, and I'm not doing a good job myself, quite frankly. But how do we continue to sustain ourselves on every level? What makes us unique and special? And I think there's a lot of things here in Clinton. And then lastly, and we keep coming back to this, because as we talk about beyond measure and getting away from standardized test scores, which they're one measure and they're important, but there's a lot more that I care about when I work with kids and see what they can do that I think makes them successful. And so that one's really important. With the Board of Ed, so part of my entry plan, I told you about staff and convocation and all the preparations, but our Board of Ed we held what we called a Board of Ed retreat this summer. And it's the first time we've done that since I've been here. But what I felt strongly about, and Annalise Spaziano is the Board of Ed chair, really felt strongly about, is that this was an opportunity, but it was also a chance with several new board members, a new superintendent, for us to get in and really talk about how that relationship is interconnected, how we work together, and that this isn't my district, that this is our district. And as a Board of Ed and a superintendent, there's that balance between who does the work and how we do the work together. And there's a commitment on the part of our Board of Ed members to really engage in that work. And so we did some conversation at that retreat about who we were and what's our why a little bit without calling it that. And these are some of the questions that I think came out of that, so core questions. We did a lot of talking. But those are 4 core ones that the work is beginning just even within the couple of months that I've been here and we've been working together. So the first one is, how does the board engage in the work of the district in a way that truly enhances, supports, and advances it, what's their mission? The second is, how do we communicate? It gets back to that. How do we communicate best our message so that the town understands, that our parents understand, that our teachers understand what we're all about? How do we demonstrate fiscal responsibility? That's a huge looming question for all of us, and as a part, it's not just my responsibility, that together collectively as a board and a superintendent team, we need to be able to answer those questions and demonstrate that to our town board so that we can move forward and get our budgets passed to support our programming, even in tight fiscal times. And then the fourth one is the ever-present one, because if we don't ask that question, then we're in trouble. How do we measure our success? So if it's not assessment scores or the state, SBAC or SAT, which is important, but I think, and all of you here, I know, believe there's so much more that's important for our kids. And that book talks about it. Many of the things we've done with Creating Innovators, The Race to Nowhere, it talks about much more than that, transcript and those assessment scores. But they're harder to measure, those habits of mind, that grit, that perseverance, that innovation. And people look at it, it's fluffy. Well, how do you show me you do that? But that's a question we need to be able to answer as we move forward. And I need to be able to answer to all of you, because it all sounds good, but how do we know, right? So that takes me to you here tonight. And the question for you guys is, how do we as a board partner with you? I know you have other questions. I know there's topics and things you'd like us to think about, so that's part of what we want to do tonight. But this is an important question to me, and I don't know the easy answer. Trying to engage parents, trying to engage the community, and I think part of the answer is what's important to you, not you engage on my agenda or not I engage on your agenda, but how do we create a refined agenda that all of us can get behind and move forward in the interest of our kids. What I've seen with this organization is that's what you've committed to, and I think that's what we've tried to commit to. And so tonight is that opportunity again with me at the helm to kind of begin to forge that partnership. And now that you know a little bit more about me, that's what we want to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
You know, it was interesting because I think the board of the PTA thought of a bunch of questions too that we could ask, and clearly I want everybody to have an opportunity to ask questions, but in listening to everything you just said, I also think you guys should feel free to just comment. I mean, even if it's not a statement, like you talked about a listening tour. So, I mean, even if it's not a question, you know, if you just have comments that you want to make or suggestions or ideas, feel free to just sort of raise your hand. It's kind of that kind of environment. And I just, this is a great thing too about your Why campaign. Just a little story is, as most of you probably know, I work at Wesleyan, and they just finished their most successful fundraising campaign ever, and the whole theme was "This is why," and it was unbelievable because when you show people what you do, it gets them motivated, and it was all through pictures, and they had pictures of people saying "because" and everything under, you know, because this is what we do, and it was hugely successful, like $500 million. I mean. And so if you think Wesley is too expensive, please still apply because there's some money for financial aid. That's the one thing drives me nuts. So anyway, so
We could have raised $500 million with our What's Our Why campaign.
What's Our Why? I think that's fantastic. So again, like I have a list of, you know, things, but I want you guys to feel free to raise your hands too.
Thoughts, reactions, questions, suggestions for me moving forward, or, you know, again, questions.
Well, I just wanted to make an example of something with the why question. When I was a science major, and when I was taking algebra, I never understood how algebra was entertaining, and I didn't find any of it entertaining. When I got to physics and went through physics 1 and physics 2, I found the algebra plugging in, and then like that burden of why this is and how stupid I have to plug this into this and calculate this, and it just isn't working. And became understandable why it furthered something. So the application plot is so interesting because down the road, whether it be the process that you're learning or whatever it is what's entertaining about it all that helps.
That's so interesting. My sister's an algebra teacher in California, and she kind of goes back to that too. She has a lot of even firefighters come in and talk about math, and I always tell them, I'm a photographer, I'm like, I need math too when I do things, and you never know what it comes back to. But yeah, and that's that talk, the TED Talk, one of my favorite of all time.
Right?
And if you read articles on it, that's why Apple's so successful. That's why the companies that are. You should have the teachers at least screen that together. Or what? Oh, you did it.
I showed it that day at convocation, and I did say, please indulge me. It was the longest convocation since I got here, and I almost went beyond contractual time. It was really bad. But I did embed it because I debated. But I almost did a flipped classroom and gave them a homework assignment, but I figured that was pushing it coming back to school. So we had an air-conditioned auditorium. We showed it, and I sat in the back and watched. Everybody was in front of me, and I was like, all right, are they buying it? Are they bored? Are they? And it did work. So you can tell that day was really, I'll never forget that day. It really was special. It was a great way to open the year. But I showed it, and it's about 17 minutes long, I think. But I had more people comment on that, and I love it. And I was thinking about that this morning, a week later, I was dealing with this, and I thought, this is why I'm doing it. I did include in it a tie back to, as teachers and working with kids, getting back to the algebra example and making it suddenly it all clicked, that we need to think about that in our planning. We need to think about that in the experiences we have kids doing. It's not just like, why do I have to learn algebra, right? Because you need to pass the test. That was the age-old answer. Or why do I have to learn this? That we really need to make that meaningful and explain the why in their experiences, not just in the voice we said. Okay?
Yeah, I love the innovation. And to go with that, what I'm hearing is the inspiration. inspiration. And I think that teachers are naturally gifted at that. That's sort of what they love kids, and they love inspiring kids to learn. They're learners themselves, that's why they get into teaching. But I feel like sometimes there's so much they have to do in the day, and that can get cut. And I know they're amazing and they're creative and they find the ways, but I love if all of our teachers had that space, that they could bring in the firefighter or the photographer, or to bring the wide.
And I know that they feel that. They feel that constraint of, like we always did with curriculum, you got to get through the book or the chapters, or you got to teach. But I've heard that voice as well from the teachers, even in the curriculum work we've done, that I have this program, I have these standards, I have to be ready for the topic test at the end. That's age old, but they feel it more now than they ever did. They feel their creativity has been pulled away because it's a little more lockstep. And there's a balance point for that, quite frankly, because too much the other way, we can't ensure that all of our kids get what they need and that equal equity of instruction and education. But the balance, I think, in the reform world has shifted. And quite frankly, I think in Clinton we've tried to push back, and I've said that to teachers, and yet they still feel it. And that's a reminder, and it's part of, I think, what I tried to say. But the reality is we're facing assessment and reform, and you're right. I love the inspiration and innovation to remember that. And I agree with you 100%. I don't have the easy answers, except that we've tried to continue to embed that application side for students, and we need to do a better job of trying to free up teachers, because I do believe if kids can do that and engage that way, then they can answer the test questions in most cases.
And I think the
But I
community
appreciate
would
your
support you. I think the community would support you if you go that direction.
And I just want to push a little bit too, and I know there's questions about, like, so much of it is embedded in what's happening at the state level, and even reading the book or reading the Beyond Measure, they talk about that sometimes you're constrained with that. But I'm wondering just specifically what you guys think, and even you as well, what you see from the outside of Power School, because there's a part of me that feels like, now I love being a parent and knowing what it gives you, but it feels like now it forces, the kids are coming home, what did I get? Did I get the A? And I'll be honest too, that even in open house, 3/4 of the teachers said, this is how I grade, this is the thing, this is what you need to get the A, and this is about absences, and it was very little about, here's what I'm teaching, and here's innovative ways of why I'm teaching it. Here's how you can see your grades, here's what happens if you don't come, and Power School feeds into that a little bit, doesn't it?
If you'll indulge me, I'll share a personal story. I'm smiling about Power School. I agree with you. And 100% on a personal level, my son started 6th grade last year, so Power School became an opportunity to transition and handle it, all of that. We had a conversation this summer because there were tears, there were fights, there were, you're addicted to Power School, Mom. And he's absolutely right. I would on my way home, or I get home, I check Power School, and there's a, there was an F today because he missed the assignment, but the teacher put it in. But I saw this F, and it was 43. It was like 0 out of 4, a homework thing that he was absent for. But I saw the F, and I reacted. And that's what I did last year to him. And we made a pact that only during the week and once a week I could look at it, not on weekends, Mom. That was his rule, not on weekends. And you're right, there's this balance of, my parents didn't know what my grades were until the report card came home. I was a good student, but they didn't know. And I could maybe miss a homework and it was okay. It's just one more piece of anxiety and pressure I think we are putting on kids, and yet it's a great communication tool. So to me, it's partly on how I'm using it, for me. But it is. It's another example of how communication and information can be used in a way that's just up to the ante for all of us. And the challenge of bringing transcripts, getting into college, and AP classes. Because I can tell you, a big part of the message I've heard over and over is we need to raise the bar. We need to have these opportunities. And a lot of times it's AP opportunities. And yet the same voice at Clinton is about we want internship, we want career, we want opportunity. about application and authentic learning as well. We kind of compete with each other. We're trying to find that balance. So I appreciate what you're saying. And I don't know if others have that same experience in terms of
I
how.
just wanted to offer another perspective on that. And first at Power School, we're around 30 years ago, and wouldn't be standing here today. I know what they would have done.
I see a lot of heads nodding.
I think a lot of the anxiety that comes with Power School comes with us as parents. And I put myself in the same shoes as Maryann. But let me give you the perspective of some of the students. For some students, actually for a lot of students, they love Power School because it's an accounting mechanism. It's a way for them to see, okay, I have everything turned in, here's where I stand, and the kids know pretty much where they are in those classes. So it's a good way for them to make sure that everything that they did do and all of the assignments that they did turn in were accounted for. If not, we teach our kids to have those conversations with their teachers so it empowers them. So kids use it daily, but when left to their own devices to use it, my experience has been it is not as anxiety provoking as when I get home tonight and I say to my son John, I'm saying we're in Power School, Dad, I already know where we are with this, and so it's a chance to give them some room to grow and to give them some independence. So there is another side to that mechanism that the kids frankly appreciate as well.
I'm just wondering from, and I don't want to monopolize this, but from the teacher perspective, are they forced, not forced, that's a bad word, but do they have to design their curriculum a little bit differently because they need to put grades in an accounting system? You know, I mean, so some people have 1,000 grades and things, and some people have hardly any. So are there standards? Are there, no?
I wouldn't say that Power School has changed how teachers teach, I say. But one of the things that it does is it's constantly calculating for teachers so they get to the end of the quarter of the semester and it's not the crazy frenzy to like do a lot of number crunching and math that they're used to do because it's like do that for you as you go. Not so much at my level, but yeah, I don't think that Power School has changed actually how teachers teach.
I don't think so either. I think when we first rolled it out, I actually sat with teachers to help them use the software to create like their grade book and how it calculates. And that was a fascinating experience as well, to talk to each teacher and say, how do you grade and what are the ways that you weight things? And I think that led us to a little bit of discussion about some consistency about how we grade and how we approach things. But grading is one of those big topics that we could head down, and it's not one that we've tried to norm so much, but we've tried to be consistent through courses as to how we're weighting things and grading things. But we've left teachers some autonomy, because that is their autonomy to determine student progress and student learning in those ways.
I too also have the same similar situation as you, where I was only allowed to look at it so often, and my husband wasn't allowed to look at it at all. I had to just once a week. He being such a high achiever, you know, he actually, when he took algebra like 2, was accused by the teacher of cheating because it came to him so easy. So that being said, and me not, that didn't come easy, and my daughter's kind of in the middle, but I find that for her, like the Power School, we're seeing how she's doing, everything is so good until that PE class of the PE. And I feel like she's stressed because she knows my husband paid for that, and she's doing like A's and everything, and then that's the C. And I feel like she's so pressured to really do well, and I feel bad for her. She was already out with 2 days this week because she was so sick. And I was like, relax, I give up. She had, I think, allergies, and then just, you know, her body was drained. You know, she's like trying so hard to do well, especially in that specific class. So I feel like our children in general are like kind of on edge a lot because it's like they're relying on the grade to be good, especially if it's an AP class, and they're expected to produce a real grade because we paid for it. And I just feel in general our kids are really stressed. You know, they're a stressed bunch of kids due to that.
basic
we're actually
basic.
looking for teachers to teach differently. Power School doesn't allow for that. It lets us obsess about grades. It lets kids, even though you say they may not, obsess about grades because that's the be all end all. If Power School isn't there, then how do we evaluate kids in a way that represents what they've actually accomplished as opposed to a B- in Sullivan's class, which is pretty good for Sullivan, you know, I mean, because he grades really hard. But that's all we end up with. We boil all this wonderful work down to a B-, and that's what Power School is. And the other thing is homework. That's the other conversation. But I think if Power School is in place, then we're not allowed to really do those truly progressive things that would take a lot of, would be pretty scary for any community, you
Well,
know.
we do have junior portfolio exhibition, which
Right,
is
right.
that. And if you guys don't know about that, that's an amazing thing that is also, you know, I think in Beyond Measure too as an example of things. But anyway,
You just need another like column in Power School that says like, you know, what's cool about the kid or something. You know, that you can label out. I gotta run and pick up my kid, but I just want to say, I'm friends with a lot of these teachers who interact with you who can't say enough amazing things about you. I am so wowed by you, and just I'm so psyched that you're here. So, see you everybody.
I also, what she was saying about the junior, was it junior? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. My daughter's a junior, and I feel like this is the year for them. And I like that your whole why, you know, that whole concept is great. But then, does colleges look at that? Like they're looking at what's the grades, what's the SATs, what's the, so that really looking, and maybe if they have a sport, you know, talent or something like that, kind of filters in. But, you know, individuals, you know, have different strengths and weaknesses that might not show up on a standardized test, you know, which is unfortunate, just, you know, especially going into, you know, extended school colleges and universities and such. I think that that's hard as parents. We want them to, you know, go where they want to go as far as a good school, get a good education. But, you know, our hands, as well as yours, are tied to a point, you know, as far as what's going to be accepted into different schools.
So I have an interesting Power School obsession. Who doesn't? My favorite thing about this year is I got a new computer. My computer died. Sorry, and now I can't get in because I don't have my password correct. So that's a good thing. So I'm not obsessing on Power School.
So I won't help you when you call central office for the password.
Yeah,
I'll say no.
Be like, no, you
can't
don't have
have
to have that password. But
could we as parents?
Do you have a question, Peggy?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
hang on,
have something to
Sarah.
add. So for me, where you're talking about why, I think, at least from a student perspective, what I would like to see is self-discovery. You know, they need to know their own why. You know, so we were talking about this just briefly before. That why are you doing this? What is your goal? Where do you see yourself in the world at large? What are you inspired by? What's going to be your driving force when you're out there in the world? I guess that, you know, it's not great.
Exactly that. I can hear you turn the other way, but it's it becomes us as parents to make them realize they are great.
That might, you know, that might, I'm sorry, Matt.
That's okay. I have younger kids, so we're still in Joel. And I know at Joel you can loop for second and third, but it seems like what a lot of people are saying is giving kids a little bit more time to develop a bond with the teacher. So is there a thought of doing that in like fourth and fifth, or like is that a little bit more of the way middle school and high school is, where you see teachers more than just, you know what I mean, like, because even like this year, you know, that I now have a kindergartner coming in, it's a brand new teacher, so now it's again, well, it's not going to be the same kindergarten that my son experienced, because it's a different teacher. So then that way, you know, maybe kids can have the opportunity to walk in that year or two and be like, okay, I know exactly what to expect. And the teacher knows exactly what that child is already about already.
So part of, there's a couple of pieces to that, I think. The early elementary grade and the concept of looping is something we've had since I got here, prior to my getting here in Clinton in 2009. And there's lots of research that for many kids, that idea of looping and staying with the teacher can be really beneficial, especially in the early grades as they're developing their skills, because the teachers do get to know them really well. In the second year, you're kind of starting right off. They know routines and expectations. There are parents who, you know, are looking for that, and so we've kept that option, and we have a couple of classrooms each year at the grade 2-3. Part of the flip side challenge, there are also parents who sometimes that relationship, you know, it's good for the child to have a change depending on the match and the child is. So we offer the two options partly for that reason. In 4th and 5th grade, I think the challenge for the looping piece really becomes the teacher's expertise, because we are, you know, knowing both sets of curriculum, being able to loop upward in 4th and 5th, that is a little more challenging to switch curricula each year as a teacher. It's not impossible. With all of the demands that are on classroom teachers, by 4th and 5th grade, there's actually some beginning conversation, and you'll see this in our neighboring school districts, where they're looking at a model in 4th and 5th that actually gets away a little bit from what you're saying, where you may have a teacher in 4th or 5th grade for math and science, and then you may have another one that focuses just on, you know, ELA or social studies and English language arts, reading and writing. That allows the teacher to really focus and become an expert in those instructional strategies and bring their passion and expertise, and then those who are much more science and math oriented can do that. So it's interesting because the models seem to change over time. My look at that, and I think we will continue to explore that question, is really it needs to be about the students' needs and make sure that we have the best instructors to deliver that. And so the models are going to relate to the student needs most importantly in the district. But there's a lot of discussion going on about what that model is, and the idea of looping at grade 4 or 5, it probably should be part of that discussion if we're looking at changing models. The other piece that you get to is the idea that looping allows a teacher to get to know a student really well, right, over time. And one of the challenges when you get to middle school and high school is kids have 6 different teachers, right, and they're trying to manage all these different expectations. And the nice thing about teaming, and we do this well in Clinton, is you have 4 teachers with similar expectations, and it makes that transition much more supported for kids, so that you have an English, a math, a social studies, a science teacher all on a team, and they have common expectations, and they work together, they meet together, they plan. What we've done here at the high school over the last 3 or 4 years coming out of High School of the Future is looked at a model that's a little more like that teaming. And so you probably, there was lots of, what is this? The idea of an academy model here at the high school. So we're taking that same idea of getting to know your student a little bit better with the idea of a 9-10 academy, 11-12 academy, 9 the whole thing on what that means. But the idea is about personalization. It's about getting to know kids better and not having this churn of all these different teachers. With that comes the fact that if I teach primarily 9th and 10th grade students, those students transitioning into high school have specific needs at that developmental age, at that transition in, and there's specific academic skills we're trying to do, as well as habits of mind. And the high school is codifying those habits of mind for their kids, and the 9th and 10th grade real core skills that you have to develop strongly. Then the 11-12 academy is really about beginning to support kids in a transition out. What does that need to look like to help kids be successful beyond? And so they're taking that concept, you know, your thread of getting to know kids and supporting them so that you don't lose ground, and really trying to codify that with our 9th and 10th grade, primarily teachers of 9th and 10th graders, and 11th and 12th. And they're working together to say, what are those skills that we can collectively say we're all going to do in a more systematic way. And that's pretty complex work, but we have our high school teachers all last year were engaged in that, and that's continuing this year. And I'm hopeful that you're going to see some of those of you who have high school kids, and as your kids move through the system, you'll see that connectivity, because that is part of our core why. It's getting to know our kids and making sure developmentally we're supporting them and giving them the foundational skills, not just to read, write, or learn content, but all of those other skills that we've been talking about. And that's, again, it's complex work and it's hard to say, but I see the seeds of all of those things come together.
I have a
but that's, I need to be thinking more about that idea. Go ahead.
I want she's looking at Joel right now, and I like the fact that the teacher that she has is explaining to us as parents that she feeds off of what they've already learned the first year.
Yay.
She's able to really make some real great headway because she already knows what she taught them, what they know, their weaknesses and strengths on specific subjects. And I think it's a great, I'm so glad they do it here, because a lot of schools don't.
And from my son's point of view, it was really nice for me to say to him, okay, this is it for the next 2 years. This is your teacher, your classroom, your peers. This is where it's going to be for the next 2 years. And I think starting second grade for him was easier than starting K or 1.
I had, both my children went through the thing, and I couldn't say enough about it, but I love the Clinton Gives the Choice, because my kids needed that little thing. But there are many of my friends' kids that needed the traditional, switching different, and needed that different environment every year. So, hats off to Clinton for really having that option and holding true to that. Going back to the academies and the ideas that you're having, doing that in the high school, I work at a school, now it's 1 to 8, but it was 3 to 8 for all the time I've been there. We do the 4 or 5, some teachers teach science, math, the other do. It's wonderful.
What's that called?
The school I work in is ECA Academy.
It's more of a departmental type model. There are different names for it, but it's really a little bit more of a departmentalization of the 4-5 experience.
But what's nice about that is it eases them in to middle school. The concept of shifting around classrooms, they're just between 2 teachers, but there is that movement. Whereas then all of a sudden you get to middle school and you are bouncing around 4. It's very nice. I also, as a teacher perspective, there's so much pressure and so much information that the teachers have to have and give out, that having them specialize in certain areas, especially in the high school, specializing in those coming in, the others specializing in those going out, I think is a great idea, because it's, after 23 years of teaching, this is by far the most challenging and overwhelming time of my teaching career. So helping the teachers by lessening what they have to give out, and
I think it is something that we're going to spend some time talking about in terms of pros and cons and how that works here in Clinton.
Right.
Because it does depend on your staff, it depends on your models, support, structures, all those things. But it's definitely on the table, and I've heard it both from some parents as well as teachers that would like to explore it. So.
And extra kudos to the moving teachers. They have to come 2 years worth of.
How many students in this school?
Here at the high school?
Yeah.
Probably, I think we're around 515 right now.
Yeah, because they just signed up their 500th child actually last Monday.
Yeah.
So it's around 50, because I have a high schooler and elementary. So yeah.
So switching gears, just on topics that we haven't touched on a little bit, is the idea of the community too. And, a big part of the PTA's focus, or not big, but part of it, is also being involved in the budget process. So I guess I'm curious what you guys at the Board of Ed might be thinking that you might do differently. Is the process going to be different? And what you would suggest we could do to help you guys through that process too, and how we can be a part of it.
So I have some thoughts and ideas, but I think I'm a little hesitant because we haven't developed our plan yet in terms of our budget. I think we've missed some opportunity, and I hope my board agrees, early on in our process to kind of build a parent and community voice and some input as we're getting started. And that happens really quickly. So, that my challenge is all of this things happening and missing that timeline. What we have done at the board level is we've established our budget and finance subcommittee and come to the conclusion as a group that we need to not wait until December and just do little board updates and then start meeting in December, but that we want to begin that work now. And so we have a series through the fall of 4 scheduled subcommittees already, with that idea of looking at the major drivers that are impacting our budget, always health insurance, enrollment, right? utilities, this new high school and how that's going to play out. We have some contractual things that are coming up that we can bid out. So the idea is to more systematically be looking at it throughout the year to be able to provide some confidence and communication to people that this isn't just, kind of in December we put it together, or I put it all together and then give it to the board and then they decide. That this really is that engaged piece where we're working together and we're really monitoring both our current budget, our trending, and some of those things that are going to impact our budget the most. And so that's a piece that we're starting, and one of the first conversations is, what is our budget cycle? We've done it this way for a while, and we got away from kind of the fall forum, which I'm not sure was all that effective. It was come tell us what you want, and we wrote it down, and that was it. So I have some ideas of models. I'm not sure what it will look like this year, especially getting started, but we definitely more to come on that, I guess, and I can use that as a vehicle to contact Val and get that out to you so we can have some participation in the budget planning early on and along the way if you so choose. Andrew,
On that note, do we know yet what the impact of the state level will be, or is that, or when we would know?
So many of you probably heard, some of the, or saw some of the headlines about the most recent decision on the Connecticut Coalition for Justice and Education Funding, the CJEF. That's been out there for like 11 years now, and I'm looking at Mr. Sullivan, so he's like, you're wrong. The pressure. But it's been some, I studied it and as it was moving through. But ultimately the idea there was that constitutionally the state was not providing enough funding for education. They were underfunding education and the group was hoping to get more funding. Well, it came to a head at probably one of the worst economic times in the state's history. So the ruling said, no, there's adequate funding, it just needs to be distributed differently. And there's a formula called the Education Cost Sharing Grant, the ECS grant, that Clinton actually gets $6.5 million of state funding there. Some of our neighbors get like $800,000. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. And over the years, it's been tweaked and changed. We benefit. Last year, there was some threatening Governor Malloy's budget that they were going to cut us by $1.5 million, and some of you might have been out there or writing to get that to change. And it was cut a little bit, but not substantially. This year's going to be really different, and I am anxious about it, and our town boards are anxious about it, but we really don't know. So what we do know is that within 180 days, that judgment said within 180 days, the legislature has to fix the formula. What does that mean? It does probably mean that we're going to be impacted, just the extent or how much. Now it's been appealed to the Supreme Court and more to come. But that was one piece of it, and I think we're going to see some changes in funding to the town. And I don't know what that looks like. And that just gets to due diligence about really taking a look at streamlining so that we don't impact programming. And whatever we can do on the operations side is part of what we're trying to look at to just prevent the greater impact on programming. Because it's been tight, and I don't know how we could sustain a $1.5 million. We have to, but we're going to have to figure that out. So that's where the due diligence up front and that extra work is going to be really important. But more to come, we're going to have to keep an eye on it. And just like last spring, it was like 1.5 million, and it was no, and just for me, it's steady and true, do what we can do and control what we can do. And my job is to really get in this year and look for any possibility for savings or things that if we had to, we could let go of to keep the core, which gets back to what's our why, right? That's got to guide us, and we need to be able to filter all of our decisions around that.
So what happened with that 1.5 mil was cut from us?
So it wasn't. The Governor Malloy, his budget had that in it, but then they went through all these changes, and then it was this budget and that budget. What finally got adopted, I think it was about 280,000. We were cut from the 6.5 million, and the town, had to. That money goes to the town, and that offsets whatever our budget is that gets passed. And so the town, our budget got passed. The town had to make up whatever difference or shortfall from the state is coming. And they had some ways that they did it, but Board of Finance was able to look at it. But every one of those impacts, at the end, does impact the taxpayers in town.
Just make one quick comment.
Yeah.
Some of this related stuff. some of the other things. Somebody that's a New
Notice
York
I didn't use
transplant.
mill rate.
Well,
Yeah,
just from a New York transplant perspective, maybe. One of my things is we're always like very pro on the school budgets. But what always drives me nuts is having a mortgage, like the notifications that come through when they give the notices halfway through, and when they give different things, it goes to the mortgage company, it goes to such and such for the escrow. We don't get anything. The end of the year, when the tax difference because of the raises and different votes comes through, I usually see in November, I'll see a notice from the mortgage company saying you're short $300 and such and such. What I'm suggesting is that either a dual notice go out, like the one that goes out to the mortgage company, like the one that goes out saying this is going to be, taxes likely to increase this, or just simply saying like you have a house that's $200,000. If the mill rate is about this, your actual Board of Education from having this vote go through will be $100 at the end of the year. If you put aside $10 a month, you're going to have it. It's not a huge deal. That's what I think bothers all is because the insurance goes up because of different things that can happen that are unforeseen. The budgets go up a bit, and a lot of people that are complaining about budgets that are in whatever position are complaining about this $200 increase, $150 increase. That if they knew 6 months before, they could set aside and be nothing. So just something that it could be an approximate, it could be such and such, but I think because if we could cut from that first to second vote, it seems to chomp out huge amounts from either library budget or this budget. It seems like we kind of help.
Talk to us about Chromebooks.
Talk to you about Chromebooks.
Yeah.
What do you want to know?
I want to know, like, what do you see, how are they going to change where?
Yeah, are teachers using them? Are teachers up to speed on how and what the best way to use them is? Are they being lost and broken already?
Not much.
Okay.
We've had a couple of constraints.
My kid already paid his big, he lost his charger on the first day he got it. So we paid our $30.
It's a learning experience for all of us, absolutely. The Chromebook piece, though, so you've asked a bunch of teachers know, and what is a change in learning. Chromebooks have been long-term, 3 years, we've been exploring since Frank Rossi came in as our Director of Technology. We started to try, even before that, but he really helped me with the conversation and the approach to our technology has always been, our goal has been to integrate it to enhance learning, not technology for the sake of technology. And I can tell you a bunch of stories as a teacher where I got technology that was useless in really helping kids learn, and then some that was pretty good. So I've always been of a mind that we need to look at preparing our kids to be independent and collaborative learners, empowered to embrace the future, which includes technology to communicate, to learn, to read, all of those things. But what were the tools that would be sustainable for us that would work in the classroom? So we started to hone in on the idea of Chromebooks as they came out, and we did some pilots. So we've had Chromebook Cart here at the high school for about 3 years now. We added another one last year, so that primarily they were used in English, almost all the time exclusively with kids. But we also started to feed them into our middle school and then to Pearson. So right now we have Chromebooks in all of our schools. Our kids in Joel are using Chromebooks. We have 1 cart. At Pearson, we have 2 carts on each floor so that teachers can have 6 or 7 at a station in their classroom. And then at the middle school, we got a technology grant, by the way, from the state last year, and we're able, for about $45,000, and we're able to add so that every team at Elliott has a Chromebook cart of 30 to divide out to use. But with that, it's not about the Chromebook, it's about the learning platform and the ways that you use it, to your point. So concurrent with that, we began professional development over the last 2 years with our teachers on how to use the Google platform, what are Google Drive, Google Slides, and now there's tons of apps and ways to use it, but to embed it into the learning experience for kids. And then Google has continued to develop their platform and develop something called Google Classroom. So last year we trained all the teachers on Google Classroom, and I hope if you have kids here, even at Pearson, then you'll see, if you ask them, do you know anything about Google Classroom, or you even, you'll see that that's a great way for teachers to be able to use this tool for kids to submit work, for them to give feedback, which is something we've worked on. So the technology goes along with the instructional strategies we're using and the application, collaboration, and feedback that we're trying to get teachers to do, and it's a streamlined way to do it. So Google Classroom is something all teachers have been trained in. I wouldn't say all teachers are using it yet, but we're getting closer and closer. And now that we have Chromebooks here, one-to-one, the difference is that it's completely reliable. I don't have to sign up for the computer lab 3 days from now and hold my lesson to get there. I know kids have it with them every day. I can ask them to take it out or not. An example that I love from the other day, one of our new projectors wasn't working in Mrs. Luther's room, Senora Luther, and she had, you know, some kind of a video clip and they were going to respond, whatever the lesson was. It wasn't working, she couldn't do it. Take out your Chromebooks, she pushed that video out through Google Classroom and they all did it right there. Didn't impact learning, her planned learning for that day, and in fact she was like, oh, that worked really well, and the kids were able to do it. I don't have to stand here, I can do, so they're learning as they go, and really I got to a point about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, when we were starting to use these, that convinced me one-to-one was the way to go. And that was that this is so much more a student learning and communication tool than a teacher-owned tool. Teachers have to be able to use it and enhance it in the classroom, but you give it to the student, and they're going to use it for research, for communication, for collaboration, for shared projects. And the Google platform allowed us to do that so kids can do it. My second favorite story was we gave Chromebooks to Pearson last year. And some of you know Mrs. Skidmore is in one room, Mrs. Baldwin in another. The kids were reading about the difference between crocodiles and alligators. Through Google Classroom, they had shared out the graphic organizer, simple T-chart. In Mrs. Skidmore's room, 2 girls working next to each other, alligators have whatever. Mrs. Carrasco's standing there, and on the screen, they're seeing crocodiles have, over in Mrs. Baldwin's room, 2 other students who were sharing that document were back and forth, or adding to the alligator. So we don't have to bring kids together across walls. They were collaborating across the school. That was within 2 weeks of providing Chromebooks. So teachers are finding amazing ways to use these, and that was my goal as I started to see that. Get the tool in the kids' hands, train the teachers, and they'll think of things that we never dreamed of, and I'm seeing it. And I'm seeing kids, when I walk into this building, kids are productive everywhere. Everywhere. They're comfortable, but they're working. They're not, it's changed the entire learning environment here. And I invite you to come in and I'll walk you around. It's amazing.
And on the sidelines of the sports fields, because I've seen the kids on the sidelines of like the soccer fields with their Chromebooks just like hanging out. So I don't know if it's working.
Yeah, I know. But we do have filtering that comes through our system, so we do have some limits both at home and here. So that isn't perfect, I'm sure. I haven't heard of any issue yet where kids have bypassed the filtering, but I'm just even blown away by the implementation of this, and it was big.
Well, they be able to have some kind of like, I was hoping, because my daughter was sick on Monday and Tuesday, some kind of Skype, so she can see us while she was in bed, either sniffling or whatever she wanted. You know what I mean? Like, that would have been
ways to be able to video
because
and
I
feed
was
that
so
out.
worried she was missing so much, and we're in September, and I was like, what are you missing? Because, you know, and I was like, gosh.
But when I was in one of the school teachers said if they're, like, if you showed a video, putting it on there, so they can go to their classroom and the assignments
She
are
wasn't
there.
even worried. I was like,
Right.
and
Assignments are there, so if I miss anything.
And I had a parent the other night say that, you know, her child had been out for she had missed school, but didn't miss school. And she had the Chromebook and using Google, her teachers, all of her teachers were using it with Google Classroom. She had it all there and didn't have the stress of missing school. So we're not there yet. I will admit to you, I don't have 100% of my teachers knowing the best way to do this, but they're sharing, and today they have professional development, and that's part of what they were doing, was looking at video on demand through Chromebooks and looking at 3 different types of apps and sharing ideas. So we're supporting that as we roll this out, and we're also supporting it in terms of the academies. What are the pieces that in 9-10 are foundational, and then how do we stretch their use and their collaboration and all of that in 11-12? So those are the kind of conversations that are happening, which is why it's so exciting here.
I got thrown out and I said, can't somebody in the class FaceTime you? She's like, just get out. Just get out.
So it's 8 o'clock, and I know we could stand here forever and all night asking tons of, you know, having tons of great conversation. I don't know if anyone has any, you know, real burning questions that on topics that haven't been addressed yet. Otherwise, you know, maybe we'll wrap up. Although I just realized I talked so much at the beginning that we didn't officially approve our budget. So, and we really hope our budget gets passed. So can somebody just make a motion to approve the budget so it can be logged in the minutes? Maryann, second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to the budget? Thank you so much. And, thank you for coming.
Thank you.